It's a very small country. We have maybe 4 to 5 different wrestling promotions here. We got one really big one, OTT Wrestling, that you may have heard of before, Over the Top Wrestling. If not, you should check them out. You'd enjoy it.
Over the Top Wrestling.
Yeah, so
I'm a historian. I watch countless videos and hours of footage still to this day, Maurice.
yeah, but what I was going to say is, like, it seems to be a really kind of exciting time in the States with smaller promotions being able to be put out there on platforms like Fight TV, have their own TV shows if they want. Like, do you feel that there's something for everyone now in the wrestling business with apps like that, and with people being able to put out shows?
Well, of course, absolutely. That's a great valid observation, and I'll say that to say this: wrestling is on. Besides the bigger organizations, and we're going to count the mothership of the WWE. It's on Monday nights for Raw. It's on Tuesday nights for NXT, and it's on SmackDown on Fox on Friday nights. You have on YouTube. You have AEW Dark and Dark Elevation on Mondays and Tuesdays. You have MLW on YouTube. You have the NWA, which is a great show. You have Impact Wrestling. You have AEW on Wednesday nights as well, and then you have Rampage on Fridays. And then you have your occasional pay-per-views, and like tonight, Forbidden Door, and you throw in New Japan, and then all the independents, whether it be on High Spots Network, IWGTV, Fight Network. There's wrestling, YouTube. There's wrestling available more than it's ever been. Is it oversaturated? I guess you could say that, but that's good for the talent and good for the fans. So to me, it's a great time now, and even here in this area, there's all kinds of streaming services, and you just have access via the internet, which is a double-edged sword. The internet's a great thing, and it's a bad thing as well, and hopefully we don't lose the power grid, but it is what it is. And so, yeah, it's a viable option, and there's so much out there to consume, but you have to be picky. I watch all the big shows just because I want to see what's current, but I also go back to the network and YouTube, and I watch a lot of other things. I do a lot of retro reviews, and you know, the greatest times of pro wrestling, late 70s, early 80s, late 80s, and then I guess, you know, when the Attitude Era came out, Maurice, and I'm jumping all over here about your question, when the Attitude Era came out in the middle 90s into the later 90s, and the ECW and all that, at that point, my friend, I was already in my early 30s, and you know, still was, you know, not super experienced in the business, but was experienced and working a lot of shows myself. So it wasn't like I was influenced like the kids that are in demographic of 18 to 30 by the Attitude Era. I had already looked at it, although it was great. It was entertainment from the, you know, Stone Cold, DX, all the different things. To me, 70s and 80s were better than the Attitude Era, but I'm from a different generation, but I can still appreciate today. And what we're going to see, you know, tonight for Wild Wild Wrestling and Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling is a combination of stars from the past, the present, and the future. And to your point, a company like Paradise Alley, one of several here in this area, is going to be on Fight TV. I mean, just, you know, it's incredible what the fans have at their access, and if you're a company, how you can promote your company and product. It's almost like the territory days again. And I know I went on and on about that, but again, Maurice, that's what I do, man. It's my MO.
Yeah, it's like the territories, I guess, but in a new kind of digital era as well, you know. And I think, like, maybe back in the day, I might be wrong on this, but there was a lot of kind of opposition with territories, and, oh, we're using this wrestler, we don't want you to use this wrestler. Now everybody kind of seems to be singing off the same hymn sheet. You'll see a wrestler here on this show, then you might see him here on this show the next night. Do you find that's easier to deal with companies these days?
Well, it can go both ways. I see a lot of companies cooperating. Again, perfect example is AEW tonight and New Japan, and you've seen it with Impact. And the only one who doesn't play that game is the WWE, because they don't have to. But even on the independent circuit, a lot of the guys and the stars on the independent circuit and the workers on the independent circuit, they don't just work for one company. Those days of doing that, and even in the territories, although it's not what people make it out to be back in the territory days, if you do your due diligence and do your research, the territories were meant for you can go on to somewhere else and still continue to have a living. And it was much different than it is now, being on the road and just the toll that it took. And you could still go work for other territories. And now I guess you could say it's still the same. It's still the same because a lot of the talent, they work for all these other different organizations in the independent, but in the big time, you see it's still not that way. WWE, AEW, unless you get something like what Tony Khan's trying to do. So I guess each era had their own problems with that, and who you could work for and who you couldn't work for. I'd have to say I'm hoping I'm answering your question. A lot of the talent in the independent circuits work for multiple companies, because if not, you're not going to get your experience, you're not going to get your exposure, you're not going to work with different people and challenge yourself. You can't stay in the same place. It didn't work that way in the territories either. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you're not going to get your money, which is most important as well, just working in one place all the time.
I'm going to say that to say this: the money in the business is not great unless you're in the upper tier. Hey, listen, you have a better chance of making the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball than making big money. There's only a handful of guys or the top guys that are making the big money. You're really doing a lot of work for your money into traveling and being on the road, and you're not getting paid like the stars are in these other sports. And I can attest to it on the independents. I was making more back in the 90s as a manager who wasn't a full-time worker than most of the workers are making nowadays.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And listen, unless there's money marks out there, there's a lot of people that overpay some of these independent workers, and there's companies that underpay. So if you're looking to make a living in the independent circuit, you better be prepared to travel all over and come out of your pocket before you ever expect to think that you're going to make a living, because you'll still hold the job unless you get a tryout or a contract. It's not even if you sign a contract. It's a lot of people, even in the bigger organizations, WWE, AEW, you get paid upon appearance, like it used to be back in WCW, NWAs, WWF back then as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that I think I covered that.
I think